Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to Conversations with India AI, our leadership podcast series, where we give you a glimpse into the workings of successful tech leaders, their eureka moments, their tribulations, setbacks, and so much more. Today, I have with me Saindev Banerjee, the co-founder and CEO of the Math Company, which is a modern hybrid consulting firm that's building contextual AI assets for Fortune 500 companies that address customization, diverse problem-solving capabilities, solution scalability, and speed, among many others. Saindev himself has been in the analytics industry from its very early days. He has worked in a large enterprise setting up the analytics capabilities and as well as a service provider for enterprises. He has spearheaded multiple analytics transformation projects for organizations for over 20 years. Some of his key achievements include leading the charter for global banks and insurance companies by building capability centers, training and mentoring high performance client teams of Fortune 100 enterprises, and developing some of the best marketing and risk solutions for diverse product portfolios that there are today. Sayan, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to Conversations with India AI.
My pleasure, Sindhuja, and thanks for this opportunity to talk to India AI.
Definitely, it's our pleasure to have you here today. So first up, tell me a little bit about yourself and really a brief into how the journey of the Math Company really began, and why did you sort of leave working with an enterprise to start your own analytics company today?
It's a good question. So from a background perspective, if you look at me and we are three co-founders, so I have two other co-founders with me. I have been in this space, you call it AI, ML, data science, analytics. There are so many names to it for more than 2 decades, as you rightly introduced. And I have seen this field literally evolving from kind of a time when nobody probably knew much about it. People used to ask what are you talking about, to today where this has become synonymous with anything which is more innovation oriented, which is more current day. Everybody talks about AI, ML, data science, and so on and so forth. So in this space, right, I have worked both for large enterprises. So if you look at my career, I've worked for GE, mostly GE Capital in India, in the US, for various GE businesses. And for almost 11 years, I used to be with this company called Mu Sigma, which is one of the largest pure play analytics company. And I was the first team member to join the founder. So I had a fantastic ride with that company. So for me, one thing which I always say that it's not just about a business idea, right? Many times people talk to entrepreneurs and talk about great business idea. For me, it's something that I'm very passionate about, right? This is I consider myself as a practitioner, and so does two of my co-founders. So we all consider ourselves as practitioners in this field who are very passionate about this. So when almost 4 years back, we left our earlier company for different circumstances, but when we decided to do something on our own, the natural thought was to do something in this AI ML space, because that's where we have done some great work already, and we saw that field kind of ever expanding and growing rapidly with so many other players who are looking at this field. So we thought, why not focus on the field that you have been familiar with, but at the same time build a more modern day kind of more time appropriate kind of a company, which is the Math Company for the last 4 years now. And it has been a great ride, to be honest with you.
I'm sure you said time appropriate. I find that very interesting. So really, what makes, according to you, the Math Company so different from counterparts and other contemporaries in the field right now?
Absolutely. So when I say time appropriate, I mean that having seen this space for a long period of time, I have an interesting vantage point to realize that if you look at any marketplace, is about demand and supply, right? At the end of the day. Now, if I look at demand, right? Demand comes from, at least in our space, we are in a B2B, kind of a solution provider. So it comes from large enterprises that we work, right? Now, these enterprises, over these last 10, 15, 20 years that I look about, have matured tremendously from, in the space of AI, ML, and I call that just use of data and information to make decisions, right? So they have evolved. They have evolved from a time which I remember, in my earlier company or even before that, where a lot of conversation was more educational. You used to go to somebody who is running a large supply chain for one of the largest retailers, and a bulk of the conversation will be about what can data do for them, because they have not leveraged that at all.
Yeah.
Now, from there, if you move forward to 2016, late 2016, when we are starting, you will realize that the time has changed, time has evolved. People are not asking you those questions at all. They know what role data plays. They know what the marketplace is like. They will quickly bucket you and slot you into something. So
Yeah.
so there has been a kind of a great evolution or maturity from a demand side. Your question obviously is more on the supply side. The supply side is kind of players who I look at as my competitors, as my counterparts, whatever you want to call it. That field has also exploded, to be honest, right? I mean, when in my earlier company, when we started, there were like you can count them with your fingers how many of them were pure play, and I'm talking about pure play AI ML companies, providing solution for large enterprises. Today, there are honestly, kind of you being in, kind of as and NASSCOM will know those numbers much better. And I'm not just talking about India, I'm talking about the world, right? There are so many different players and of so many different colors and textures, and each of them, and there are clear some grouping. So I think your question is very interesting, because where we stand out, or what is so special about the math company, I think that answer honestly depends on whom you are comparing us with, because there is no one set of companies to compare with us with, right? There are players like us who are pure play kind of AI ML company providing large enterprise solutions. There are there are all these large system integrators. You took all the large Infys, TCS, and everybody in the world. They all are into this space today. Large BPM companies,
exactly.
The Genpact, EXL, WNS, they are all in this space. The consulting, kind of the strategy consultants, the McKinseys, BCGs of the world, as well as the Big Four, they all have a fairly, kind of a large and prominent AI ML practice.
Very true.
So. And then there are product companies who offer specific products in a specific area. People are building their own capabilities in house. So I can keep going, right? I mean, if I look at all the different market segments that you compare with, so it is obviously you can think of it as very challenging, because the market is no longer kind of that there is a large white space and you just come and conquer.
Yes.
But at the same time, it is very exciting, and I call it exciting because the size of the pie is expanding every day as we kind of talk. Now, instead of going into where we differentiate from each of these type of players, I would like to kind of call out a few interesting highlights that I strongly believe kind of helps us differentiate from our competition. And the proof is in the pudding. You probably know that in this last 4 years we have built a fairly large enterprise. Given the time period and the field we are talking about, we are about 400 people strong today. Have some of the largest logos or companies that we work with in the retail, CPG, insurance, banking, automotive space. And there's a large global players, kind of in the US and Europe and stuff like that in here. So clearly something is appealing to them, right?
Yeah.
Now, what are those? I think first and foremost, if you look at us, our breadth of offering, our breadth of expertise is something I think which is interesting for many players, because we are not a player who are very deep into a specific space. There are companies who specialize in not just healthcare or not just pharmaceuticals, but Salesforce effectiveness within that. So they can go very deep into it, and that's their strategy, that's their play. We believe in a lot more horizontal play, a lot more in industry and a function agnostic play, and therefore our breadth of expertise is something that many of our customers kind of like, because we can bring a very kind of appropriate solution for their problem. That's what they like. The second thing is our almost single-minded focus on consumption. What happens in this space, if you kind of look at in this space of AI, because there is too much focus on shiny objects. Right? Unfortunately, I have to say shiny objects because there's too much of people sometimes call it hype, sometimes they call it shiny object, but a lot of focus on really the cool technology, the really cutting edge stuff, things that you'll get amazed at, kind of in a lab setup. You'll walk into a lab and you'll feel like there is magic happening around you. But our focus is not necessarily the lab setup. Our focus is large enterprises and decision making in those large enterprises, right? And I'm talking about Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. And decision making in those large enterprises is not about just the shiny objects, not about something which is cool. It is about creating some insight, some whatever you do with data. But at the end of the day, am I leveraging it to make a better decision? Am I leveraging it to improve my top line? Am I leveraging it to improve on my bottom line? Am I getting a better margin? So on and so forth, right? So our focus on consumption has almost given us this whole thing about creating an analytics app. So what we do is we don't just create insights. We don't create cool algorithms which sit somewhere in your system. Our focus 99% of the time is to build an analytics app that my end user can literally use on a day-to-day basis to make decisions. And in order to build that app, we have also created, and I can come into more details of it, we have created a proprietary platform called Codex, which is really helping us to build those apps that are kind of a very rapid pace. So I think the whole thing about the breadth of expertise, building apps, and then building it on our own proprietary platform definitely kind of gives us a few kind of interesting competitive edge, if you will, and help capture a little bit of white space that definitely exists.
Definitely. I think the capabilities that you're bringing on forth are very today's solutions. I think, of course, there is an expectation in the market in terms of having an app as well as a proprietary platform, both of which I think you have completely covered. And, that sort of gives you a competitive advantage to serve your clients better and really sort of fill those data gaps more competently. So do tell me about Codex. I mean, what does it really do? And it'll be great if you could just sort of illustrate with an example of maybe in one sector of your choice.
Absolutely. Sure. So before I talk about Codex, right, you have to understand where we are coming from. If you look at our background, at least the co-founders and the initial kind of the leadership team that we put together, a lot of us come from a consulting background. We come from a pure services background where solutions are based on people, human beings, right? Human beings, their knowledge of the space, their knowledge of technology, their knowledge of techniques, their knowledge of applied math, all of these are important for us to create a solution. And we have first-hand experience of what are some of the challenges of that model, right? I mean, be it in terms of scaling, be it in dependence on individual talent, be it there are a bunch of those challenges. It takes time, more importantly, to create a custom solution grounds up. What is the other solution that organizations have? They can buy a product off the shelf, right? I mean, all these enterprise products they can buy off the shelf. A product solves a specific problem very, very well, no doubt about that. But it solves a specific problem. So if you have to solve multiple problems, and that is the truth, right? In an enterprise, you have to solve so many different problems. You have to solve marketing problems, you have to solve supply chain problems, you have to solve risk management problems. So you have to buy that many products in that case, right? To be kind of very effective. So we wanted to bring something which is probably kind of a good combination of the two that addresses some of the challenges in each of them. And I'm not going into there are some terminologies that kind of the analyst community will like to give to that space somewhere in between. But net Codex is our proprietary end-to-end analytics platform that helps us to build these applications that I spoke about in a very efficient and effective manner. When I say efficient, why am I calling it efficient? Because this platform has pre-built solutions of most of the common problems that you can. Let me take an example, very simple example. If you look at any large consumer product goods, right, companies, be it a Unilever, be it a Coca-Cola, be it a Anheuser-Busch InBev, one of their biggest challenge is forecasting their future demand. Right? If I know how many units will be sold over the next, and I'm taking a very simplistic example because that will be easier. I don't want to get into complexity for kind of the benefit of the audience probably, but it is a very, very important problem because if that can be solved as accurately as possible, believe me, that makes or breaks kind of a CPG company almost, right? So in order to do that forecasting, the traditional approach in a services model would have been that, look, here are a bunch of data scientists, data engineers who come together, leverage the appropriate data, build the right kind of algorithms, and then, kind of create a forecast, right? They create a forecast for the next 3 months, next 6 months, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, so on and so forth. Our approach is we leverage Codex where there already exists demand forecasting, a base solution for demand forecasting for a CPG company, right?
Okay.
However, because we work with large enterprises, they all are very unique, right? Each of their problems are very nuanced. The forecasting problem for an Unilever itself differs depending on which product line we are talking about, which
True.
geography we are talking about, right? I mean, predicting in a kind of an Europe or an American market is very different from predicting in a Asia Pac market, and the dynamics are very different.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of these client specific nuances which we call as context. You introduced while introducing me called contextual AI. So this is nothing but context, right? So how do you configure, first of all, how do you configure this existing app, leveraging the context of the client is something that Codex allows you to do, right? It is not, so that's that first level of the flexibility. It allows you to customize the app as well, right? I don't necessarily need to use the app as it is because it probably uses, three different methodologies to come up with the forecast, right? But I, for this company or this client, have seen that, we have used two other algorithms, successfully in the past. So I have an ability to bring in those algorithms as well, right, into it.
Okay.
And then more importantly, it creates an application at the end of it, right? That is hosted in the platform itself. So I don't need to necessarily go out and look at a Tableau dashboard, look at kind of a Power BI. I can just open Codex. I can not only build my configure or kind of customize my models. It can also continue to look at my end outcome, right? Which is our focus on consumption. Because unless I can see some of the results, unless I can play around with some. By the way, what do I mean by play around? Okay, tomorrow if today's is a good day, we are talking while elections in the US is on, right? So depending on what happens to those results, you can say that some of the market dynamics will change. Yes. So if it changes, I can key those in and I can see how my forecast changes.
Okay.
So ability to look at, to simulate various scenarios is a big advantage of what we are offering. And by the way, all of this can be done instead of 6 months, we can do it in 6 weeks. Something that takes 4 months, I can do it in 4 weeks. So time to value, that is where the efficiency comes in. And it is effective because it actually codifies all of our combined knowledge. All the knowledge that you have built over these years, solving several problems for the large enterprises. These are all codified in the system.
Got it. I think that explains it very, very accurately. And I think, you've addressed a lot of different timely points, especially when it comes to fast moving industries, CPG retail, which are very dynamic in nature. So that kind of brings me to my next question. I think, this is something all data science, analytics, AI companies from big to small are all addressing this in their own way possible. So, how do you really respond to sort of red flags and data sets that, propagate and make biases even worse? And, as a leader personally, how do you find it, on a scale of 1 to 10, how challenging is it really to sort of enforce this culturally across the organization?
Yeah. So it's a very, very valid point, right? Being in the forefront of the AI revolution, being a, as I call ourselves, a modern day AI ML company solution provider. Our goal is to definitely, kind of propagate ethical, unbiased AI. The simplest example that always comes to, my mind is if I'm building an algorithm to predict that, say, a candidate that you are interviewing, what is the likelihood that you will, select that candidate? There is likely to be a bias, a gender bias that can always creep in. Because historically, if you look at historical data, for some reason, kind of there has not been enough female or women candidates who has been selected for that role, right? So now if you just look at that data and build your algorithms, there is very likely that there will be a giant gender bias that will creep in. And unless you are conscious about it, you're thinking about it, you'll not even recognize that there is a bias, because it is not something that is so apparent. You'll say, wow, the data is telling me this and this is the best answer, right? But by the way, the data is itself biased. And I just gave a very simple example, and there are so many more examples, because at the end of the day, you have to understand that data gets generated from human action. When I, kind of do something, we work on the factory floor, we buy products, we sell products, we set prices. We do, there are certain activities that we do that generates data, right? Without our activity, no data would have been, kind of generated. So inherently there has to be bias. Now, how do you deal with that? First of all, you have to be aware and conscious that this is happening. Now, there is a very interesting, and there is a lot of literature around that, which we obviously, bring together, try and get the best practices. One of the things that for the last, kind of couple of years that we have been, I would say, trying to institutionalize, I won't claim that we have already institutionalized, is this practice called data ethnography, right? This is a very interesting, aspect, because while everything about data, everything about AI is a very left-brained, very logical kind of a thing. This brings in a lot of history, human behavior, economics, psychology, a lot of those elements into it. People who practice data ethnography are not necessarily your typical data scientist or data engineer. These are people of different backgrounds. So we have seen a lot of success in some of our projects where we put those toll gates, the right toll gates, where the data ethnographer kind of comes into the picture, and then kind of look into it. And there is lot more to be done, right? In that. Now, to your question of how challenging is it? See, first of all, I'm tempted to say, in a scale of 1 to 10, it is very challenging 8. At the same time, I'm tempted to say it is 2, and I'll tell you why. It is challenging because, as I said, most of us in this space are very left brain oriented. That is our strength in most cases, right? Because if I start completely taking our eyes off data and kind of the patterns in that and the kind of different things that you need to recognize, then I will not get to the best possible solution, right? So there is a need to be left brained, and therefore whenever I bring in this little bit of right brained element into it, it is challenging for people to balance it. It is not so easy. But as a company who is focused on data and kind of the AI and the ML and everything around data, we have institutionalized some of these in our processes. We have it's almost given that in the stage of solution design, or at the stage of when you are validating your outcome, right, against some real-time data, you take cognizance of what potential bias could have crept in, right, and ask those questions. So building those small things into your process makes it, I'd say, a little easier. I won't say that it's given, but it makes it easier. It forces people. See, what you have to do, you have to slow down the process. Many times what happens, this whole thing of automation is do it fast, right? Now, at times you have to just slow it down, take cognizance of some of these questions, and then again catch up speed. Right?
Correct.
And in that process of slowing down is where you catch some of these biases and you correct. And again, every time it is not very easy to correct, but you have to still call out the result saying that there is a bias. So let us collect some unbiased data probably in the next 6 months, 1 year, and then we'll again kind of see if I can refine the solution. So many times it can lead to fresh data collection as well, right? With those biases.
Absolutely. I think when you're approaching bias from an architecture perspective and you're actually sort of institutionalizing it, I think your results are a lot more viable over a longer period of time as opposed to the other approach. Where I think now is where a lot of companies are scaling back and reassessing a lot of their steps. So speaking so much about data, I think it's only valid to bring up this point. Your company really prides itself on hiring some of the top data scientists, and this is, I think you'll also agree with me, is something that is an area, a talent pool that a lot of enterprises are really having a dearth of and want to know how to address this one particular skill gap. So what do you really think about the quality of data scientists emerging out of India today, and what are the things that can be made to sort of increase their numbers and also increase their numbers in a substantial manner and enhance their quality of employability?
Yeah, again, a very, very appropriate question, given the time where we are. So first of all, on your first point, right? Yes, we pride ourselves on hiring a lot of good talent from the market. But I should also add that it is not just about hiring the right talent or the good talent. We have from day zero focused on our in-house learning program that we call as Coach, which almost operates like a university on its own, right? Inside, right? Which is we call that learning platform called Coach. I think that has played a big role in terms of creating some of this talent. And honestly, given where we are, and I'll come to that point, shortly. Particularly those who wants to scale in this kind of space, and they want to really build a whole AI practice and build a company around it. I think just relying on pure market talent can be a bit detrimental. You have to look for smart people. You have to look for logical people. You have to look for people who are who are willing to learn, who are willing to adapt, and then you have to be confident that you can kind of impart some of those kind of learnings and do that. But having said that, again, from the vantage point of being in the space for more than 20 years now, the talent space has changed drastically, Sindhuja. I must tell you that. See, if you look at all educational institutions, all academia, kind of be it the IITs, the NITs, the private institutes, all of them, IIMs, I don't know. I'm just talking about India, right? And the same holds globally as well. Even in the US, which is also a very important market for us because we hire quite a few people there as well. I don't know of any, institution of repute who are not having a specific program on AI, ML, data science in different forms, right?
Yeah.
Is this enough? No, it is not enough because the field is, kind of expanding so rapidly. I think more needs to get done. But if I look at the curve, right? I mean, from where we were even 10 years back to where we are, we have made tremendous progress from that standpoint. Just pure availability of talent who are, familiar with I'd say the basics, because 10 years back, 15 years back, when I started in my earlier company, that itself was kind of, there was none, right? So that has definitely changed, but a lot more needs to be done. I think people are doing the right things in the right direction. A lot of private institutions, who are imparting, because AI is the need of the day. There is so much happening here. There is a lot more that are coming up who are offering, kind of courses, in conjunction with global institute of reputes. All of these are happening. But if I look at the talent pool today, and if I look at, if you ask me, if there is a gap that I see, right? Because I hire, a lot of people from the market, right? And I hire a lot of, even young, fresh graduates, right? Really, really fresh out of college. And we love to, kind of make them into, kind of an AI professional, right? At the end of the day. And by the way, as I said, that in our mind is also a scalable way. I mean, I can't just rely on the market. But having said that, I think one big gap that needs to get addressed, and I think the corporate world, all of us, kind of the employers, I think we need to play a bigger role there. And I don't know how much the institutes, the academic institutes or the academia can play a role, is focus on, context, focus on business, and focus on consumption. Context and business goes hand in hand. That it is not about, the latest and the greatest in the neural network. It's not about, how much of deep learning I am really, kind of familiar with. Right? Yes, you obviously have to know the basics. In today's world, you don't have to know everything. Kind of, like you don't have to really mug up everything. There is enough for you to learn as long as you understand the basics. But we have to remember that at the end of the day, we are problem solvers. So whatever we do, if it is not solving a problem, and I'm not saying necessarily B2B world, even in a B2C world, if it is not solving the problem in hand, then everything around technology, everything around technique is useless. So I think the main thing that I see as a gap, and again, I'm not complaining, but it's quite natural. And where I think the corporate world needs to play a bigger role in my mind is to bridge that gap of the technical knowledge, the knowledge of the technology, the applied math, and all the cool stuff, and their application. Not just application. How will they be consumed? Yes, I'll create this kind of excellent engine, but is there a way for somebody to leverage that on a day-to-day basis to make a decision? So that I think is an area that and the other area that I see is a great opportunity. What I said about data ethnographers, but in general, to bring in some of these other disciplines. For example, economics. Lot of the people in this field today are kind of computer science engineers, kind of or have done some engineering degree or have done some mathematical degree, statistics. Feel like economics, right? Plays a big role. That at the end of the day, demand supply, how business operates, that is taught fundamental, kind of, if you understand economics, you'll understand that, right? You'll understand how pricing works, right? At the end of the day. Behavioral economics, a lot of things about behavior, a lot of things about human psychology. As I said, the data gets generated by us as humans, doing some activity. So what is really going on? How are this data getting generated? I think thinking through those will really make us better, will make us more, human, kind of AI professionals.
Yeah, definitely.
Rather than, because we are humans, the machine will do its job. The man-machine combination. We'll have to see what we as humans will bring to the table, because more and more machines will do most of the stuff that we are doing today, right? I mean, that's a natural, kind of a direction that it has happened always. I'm not talking about today. If you look at 50 years back, 100 years back, from the time of industrial evolution, that has happened.
Exactly.
What human used to do, kind of machines have started doing it. Then humans start, have to work more on design. Humans have to start thinking or work more on, formulating a problem right, identifying the right kind of data sources.
Correct.
How do I use my insights and my outcomes for a better decision, for a better world? So, that's where it is.
Great. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I do believe that, to really be able to bridge these gaps in talent, I think the corporate leaders that we have today, like you, a lot of the startup entrepreneurs that we have as well, also will play an incremental role in making the value proposition, for students and those getting into this field so much higher, because of, again, ending with what you do best, which is setting the context. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks so much for your time, Sayandin. Everyone, thanks so much for coming, to our podcast, Conversations with India AI. You can follow our updates on our website and social channels, and we'll be back very soon with another very exciting story. Until then, stay safe and stay connected.
Thank you, Sandhya. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.